My cousin Madison looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not real family, Sarah, just adopted." But when the lawyer slid Grandpa's house deed toward me at the will reading, her face went white as a sheet. This is the story of how one cruel comment backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, and what I'm about to tell you happened just 6 months ago. It completely changed how I see family, belonging, and what it really means to be loved. Before I dive into this wild story, let me introduce you to the players in this family drama that sounds like it came straight out of a movie. First, there's me, Sarah Chen Patterson. Yes, I have two last names, and there's a reason for that. I'm 28, work in marketing, and I was adopted when I was 3 years old. The Chen comes from my birth parents, who I never really knew. The Patterson comes from the family that raised me, loved me, and gave me everything I could have asked for. Well, most of them did. Then there's Madison Patterson, my cousin. She's 31, works in real estate, and has never let me forget that she's Grandpa's real granddaughter. Madison is one of those people who smiles at you while delivering the cruelest comments, always followed by, "I'm just being honest," or "someone had to say it." She's got that perfect blonde hair and that confidence that comes from never having to question whether you belong somewhere. My grandpa, Henry Patterson, was the heart of our family. This man was 6'2", with hands like baseball mitts and a laugh that could fill up any room. He worked construction his whole life, built the family home with his own hands back in 1967, and raised 4 kids in that house. When I was adopted at 3, he was the first person to call me his granddaughter. Not his adopted granddaughter, just his granddaughter. Period. He passed away 3 months ago at 84, and I'm still not over it. Uncle Robert is Madison's dad and Grandpa's eldest son. If Madison learned her subtle cruelty from anyone, it was him. He's the type of man who makes comments like, "Blood is thicker than water" at family dinners while looking directly at me. He never said I didn't belong outright, but he had a way of making sure I knew I was different. My mom, Patricia, was Uncle Robert's sister-in-law and the woman who chose me. She and my dad couldn't have biological children, so when they found me through an adoption agency, she always said it was meant to be. Mom passed away from breast cancer 5 years ago, which is when I became Grandpa's primary companion and caregiver. She was the one who always reminded me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when life gets hard. There are other family members in this story, too. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who mostly stayed neutral in the ongoing tension between Madison's side of the family and me. They're good people, but they often chose silence over standing up for what was right. Now, here's what you need to understand about our family dynamic. On the surface, we looked like a normal, loving family. We had barbecues, holiday gatherings, and birthday parties just like everyone else. But underneath, there was always this undercurrent of us and her. Madison and Uncle Robert made sure I never forgot that I was different, that I didn't have the Patterson blood running through my veins. For 25 years, I tried to prove I belonged. I was the granddaughter who remembered every birthday, who showed up to every hospital visit, who called just to check in. When Grandpa's health started declining, I was there every single day. I managed his medications, drove him to doctor appointments, and spent countless evenings just sitting on his porch, listening to his stories about the old days. But according to Madison, none of that mattered. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't real family. I was just the adopted girl who was trying too hard to fit in where she didn't belong. Little did she know, Grandpa Henry had been watching everything, and what happened at that lawyer's office 3 weeks after his funeral would change everything I thought I knew about family, belonging, and what it really means to be someone's legacy. Trust me, you're not going to believe what happens next. To understand what happened at that lawyer's office, you need to know what my life was like growing up as the only adopted kid in the Patterson family. And let me tell you, it wasn't always easy. My earliest memory is of my 3rd birthday party. I was sitting at this little plastic table with a Dora the Explorer cake, and I remember asking my mom, Patricia, why I looked different from everyone else. She sat down next to me, brushed my hair back, and said, "Sweetheart, some families are born and some families are chosen. Daddy and I chose you because you were exactly who we were waiting for." That conversation shaped how I saw myself for years, as someone who was wanted, someone who was chosen. But the rest of the Patterson family didn't always see it that way. Don't get me wrong, my parents were incredible. Dad worked double shifts at the factory to make sure I had everything I needed, and Mom volunteered at my school just so she could be close to me during the day. They never once made me feel like I was anything less than their daughter. But extended family gatherings were a different story. Picture this. Every Christmas, Easter, and 4th of July, we'd gather at Grandpa Henry's house. The adults would sit around the dining room table, sharing stories about family history, talking about who had Uncle Tommy's nose or Grandma Rose's stubborn streak. I'd sit there quietly, knowing that none of those genetic connections applied to me. Madison, even as a kid, would make comments like, "Sarah doesn't have great-grandma's eyes like the rest of us do." She was only 7 when she first said that, but Uncle Robert just chuckled and said, "That's right, Madison. You're keeping track of the family traits." As I got older, the comments became more sophisticated, but just as cutting. During my high school graduation party, I overheard Uncle Robert telling someone, "Sarah's done well for herself considering she's not really ours." When I started dating, Madison would joke that my future kids would dilute the Patterson gene pool. She always said these things with a smile, like they were harmless observations, but they stung every single time. The only person who never made me feel different was Grandpa Henry. When I was 8, I came home crying because a kid at school said adopted kids were rejects their real parents didn't want. Grandpa pulled me onto his lap on that old porch swing and said, "Sarah, let me tell you something. I built this house with my own 2 hands, but that doesn't make it any less home to the birds that nest in the eaves or the flowers your grandma planted in the garden. Family is about who belongs, not about who was here first." Those words stuck with me through everything. When Mom got sick with breast cancer when I was 23, I moved back home to help take care of her. Madison lived just 20 minutes away, but rarely visited. "It's too hard for me to see her like that," she'd say, but I was there for every chemo appointment, every middle-of-the-night emergency, every difficult conversation with doctors. After Mom passed away, Dad couldn't bear to stay in the house with all those memories, so he moved to Florida to live near his sister. That left Grandpa Henry pretty much alone. Madison and Uncle Robert would stop by occasionally, usually when they needed something, but day-to-day care fell to me. And honestly, I didn't mind. Grandpa had always been my safe harbor in the family storm. I started visiting him every single day after work. We'd sit on that same porch swing where he'd comforted me as a kid, and he'd tell me stories about building the house, about Grandma Rose's garden, about raising 4 kids in those walls. I helped him organize his medications, drove him to doctor appointments, and grocery shopped for him every weekend. When his arthritis got bad, I'd come over to help him with basic tasks like opening jars or reaching high shelves. Madison knew about all of this, of course. The whole family did. But in her mind, I was just doing what I was supposed to do, trying to earn my place in a family that had already given me more than I deserved. She'd make comments like, "It's nice that Sarah has finally found a way to contribute to the family," or, "I guess this is her way of paying us back for taking her in." 3 months ago, Grandpa Henry passed away peacefully in his sleep. I was the one who found him when I came for our usual morning coffee together. I was the one who called 911, who contacted the family, who handled most of the funeral arrangements because I knew exactly what he would have wanted. And now, 3 weeks after laying him to rest, we were all sitting in Attorney Michael Torres' office for the reading of his will. I honestly didn't expect much. Maybe his old toolbox or one of Grandma Rose's quilts. Something small but meaningful to remember him by. What I definitely didn't expect was for Madison to use this moment to remind me, once again, exactly where I stood in the Patterson family hierarchy. But Grandpa Henry had been planning something that none of us saw coming. Walking into Attorney Michael Torres' office that Tuesday morning, I felt like I was heading into a battlefield. The office was one of those old-school lawyer places with dark wood paneling and leather chairs that creaked when you sat down. Madison was already there when I arrived, wearing a crisp white blazer like she was dressed for a business meeting. She had this satisfied look on her face like someone who already knew how the story was going to end. Uncle Robert sat next to her, checking his phone and making it obvious he had more important places to be. My Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert's wife, gave me a sympathetic smile and patted the chair next to her. A few other cousins were scattered around the room, all of us waiting for the lawyer to begin. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone knew the big question was about the house, that beautiful Victorian home that Grandpa had built with his own hands in 1967. It sat on 2 acres with the most incredible wraparound porch and Grandma Rose's garden that still bloomed every spring. The house was worth at least $400,000, but more than that, it was the heart of our family's history. Madison had been talking about inheriting that house for years. At family gatherings, she'd make comments like, "When this house is mine, I'm going to update the kitchen," or "I can't wait to turn Grandpa's workshop into a home office." She talked about it like it was already decided, like it was her birthright as the eldest biological grandchild. As we waited for Attorney Torres to start, Madison leaned over to me and whispered, "I still don't understand why you're even here, Sarah." Her voice had that sweet, fake tone she used when she was about to say something cruel. I mean, what could Grandpa possibly have left you? Maybe his old fishing tackle box. I tried to ignore her, but she wasn't done. She looked around the room to make sure she had an audience, then said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Honestly, I don't know why you're even here, Sarah. You're not real family, just adopted." The words hit me like a physical blow. Even though I'd heard variations of this my entire life, hearing it spoken so bluntly, so carelessly in front of everyone, made my face burn with embarrassment and anger. Uncle Robert actually nodded in agreement, like she'd made some profound observation. "Madison," Aunt Linda said quietly, "that's not appropriate." But Madison was on a roll now. "No, someone needs to say it. This house has been in our bloodline for 3 generations. Grandpa built it for his real family, for the Pattersons who are actually Pattersons. I'm the eldest biological grandchild. I'm carrying on the Patterson name after I get married, and I actually understand what this house means to our family history." She gestured around the room dramatically. "I mean, look at all the family photos on Grandpa's walls, all the memories built in those rooms. Sarah wasn't even there for most of them. She showed up when she was 3 and has been trying to insert herself into our story ever since." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Part of me wanted to stand up and walk out, to spare myself whatever other humiliating comments she had planned. But another part of me, the part that remembered all those evenings on Grandpa's porch, all those conversations about what family really meant, made me stay. "You're right, Madison," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm not blood, but I was here every single day when Grandpa needed someone." Madison rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, don't act like you did that out of the goodness of your heart. You were obviously trying to get something out of it. I mean, why else would someone spend every day with an old man unless they expected some kind of payoff?" The accusation stung because it was so far from the truth. I spent time with Grandpa because I loved him, because he was the one person in the family who had never made me feel like I didn't belong. But explaining that to Madison would be like trying to explain color to someone who was blind. "Madison, that's enough," Aunt Linda said more firmly, but Uncle Robert spoke up. "Actually, Madison has a point. The house should stay in the bloodline. That's what Dad would have wanted, to keep it in the real family." "The real family," Madison repeated, looking directly at me. "Not someone who was just taken in out of charity." I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of these people who had spent 25 years making me feel like an outsider. I thought about all the times I'd sat in this same position, at family dinners, holiday gatherings, birthday parties, listening to subtle and not so subtle reminders that I didn't really belong. Just then, Attorney Torres walked into the room carrying a thick folder and a serious expression. He looked around at all of us and said, "I'm sorry to keep you waiting. Let's begin with the reading of Henry Patterson's last will and testament." Madison straightened in her chair, that satisfied smile returning to her face. She glanced at me one more time and mouthed, "Nice try." But what happened next would wipe that smug look off her face forever. Attorney Michael Torres was not what you'd expect from a small-town lawyer. He was probably in his 50s, with silver hair and these sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through people's facades. He'd been Grandpa's lawyer for over 20 years. handling everything from property transfers to business contracts. More importantly, he'd been Grandpa's friend. As he settled into his chair and opened that thick folder, the room fell completely silent. Even Madison stopped her whispered commentary to Uncle Robert. There's something about the formal reading of a will that makes everyone suddenly aware they're witnessing something permanent, something that can't be undone. "Thank you all for being here today," Attorney Torres began, his voice carrying the weight of decades of legal experience. Henry Patterson was very specific about how he wanted this process to go. He spent considerable time ensuring that his final wishes were clear and legally binding. He pulled out his reading glasses and looked around the room, making eye contact with each of us. When his gaze landed on me, I saw something in his expression. Not pity, but something that looked almost like anticipation. "Let's begin with the smaller bequests," he continued, consulting the papers in front of him. "To my daughter-in-law, Linda Patterson, I leave my wife Rose's jewelry collection and her china set, knowing that you will treasure them as she did." Aunt Linda wiped away a tear and whispered, "Thank you, Henry." "To my son, Robert Patterson, I leave my workshop tools and equipment, hoping they will serve you better than they have served me in recent years." Uncle Robert nodded approvingly. Dad always said those tools were top quality. Attorney Torres continued, methodically through the smaller items. Cousin Jenny received Grandpa's vinyl record collection. Cousin Mike got his fishing equipment. Various aunts and uncles received photo albums, books, and personal mementos. Each bequest was thoughtful, showing how well Grandpa had known and loved each family member. But everyone was waiting for the big announcement. I could feel the tension building as we got closer to the main asset, the house that had defined our family for over 50 years. Madison was practically vibrating with excitement. She kept smoothing her blazer and checking her hair like she was preparing for a photo opportunity. At one point, she leaned over to Uncle Robert and whispered, "I already called a contractor about updating the kitchen. I want to start renovations as soon as possible." Uncle Robert smiled proudly. "Your grandfather would be happy knowing the house is going to someone who appreciates its value and will take care of it properly." The comment was clearly directed at me, another reminder that I wasn't the proper choice for such an important inheritance. I tried to prepare myself mentally for what was coming. Maybe I'd get a small monetary gift or one of Grandpa's books. I'd already decided I would accept whatever I received gracefully, and then leave as quickly as possible to avoid any more of Madison's commentary. Attorney Torres seemed to sense the anticipation in the room. He looked up from his papers and said, "Before I continue with the major bequest, I want to share something Henry told me during our last meeting." The room became even quieter, if that was possible. Henry said to me, "Michael, I've been watching this family for 84 years. I've seen people come and go. I've seen children grow up, and I've learned something important about what makes a family strong. It's not the blood in your veins. It's the time you spend, the care you show, and the love you give when no one is watching." Madison shifted uncomfortably in her seat. For the first time since we'd arrived, her confident expression flickered slightly. Attorney Torres continued, "He also said, some people are born into a family, and some people earn their place in it. I want my final act to honor the person who truly understood what family means." My heart started beating faster. Those words sounded exactly like something Grandpa Henry would say, but I couldn't let myself hope for what they might mean. "Now," Attorney Torres said, his voice taking on a more formal tone, "regarding the family home at 1247 Maple Street, along with all furnishings and the surrounding 2 acres of property." Madison sat up straighter, that confident smile returning to her face. She actually reached out and squeezed Uncle Robert's hand in anticipation. Attorney Torres paused dramatically, looking around the room one more time. Henry was very specific about this bequest. He wanted me to read his exact words. He cleared his throat and began to read directly from the will. "To my family gathered here today, I want to be crystal clear about what family truly means to me. Family is not about sharing DNA. It's about sharing your time, your heart, and your presence when it matters most." The smile began to fade from Madison's face. "The house goes to the one who acted like family." And then he looked straight at me. The silence in that room was deafening. Attorney Torres was looking directly at me, and I could feel every pair of eyes in the room following his gaze. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. "Sarah Chen Patterson," he said, his voice clear and official. "Your grandfather has left you the house at 1247 Maple Street, including all furnishings, personal belongings, and the surrounding 2 acres of property." The words hit me like lightning. I literally felt my mouth fall open. For a split second, I thought I'd misheard him. Me? The adopted granddaughter who wasn't real family? The house that Madison had been planning to renovate for years? But the lawyer wasn't finished. He reached across that massive oak table and slid the deed toward me. The deed to Grandpa's house. The deed that was now legally mine. Madison's face went through a transformation that I'll never forget as long as I live. The confident smile melted away first, replaced by confusion. Then her eyes went wide with shock. Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to speak, but no words would come out. The color drained from her face until she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What?" she finally managed to whisper. Then louder, "What did you just say?" Uncle Robert shot to his feet so fast his chair rolled backward. "There has to be some mistake. Sarah isn't even—" He caught himself before saying the words, but we all knew what he was thinking. "There's no mistake," Attorney Torres said calmly, not even looking up from his papers. "I have the original will right here, witnessed and notarized. Henry was very clear about his intentions." Madison found her voice then, and it came out as almost a shriek. "This can't be right. I'm his real granddaughter. She's just adopted. This house has been in our family for generations." "Madison?" Aunt Linda said quietly, but Madison was beyond listening to reason. "No." Madison stood up, her hands shaking. "This is insane. She doesn't even have Patterson blood. How can she inherit the family home? Dad, do something." Uncle Robert was turning red in the face. This has to be illegal somehow. He wasn't thinking clearly at the end. Sarah obviously manipulated him, spent all that time there to influence him. "That's a serious accusation, Robert," Attorney Torres said, his voice taking on a warning tone. "I can assure you that Henry Patterson was completely sound of mind when he made these decisions. In fact, he updated this will just 6 months ago." 6 months ago. That would have been right around the time Madison made that comment at Easter dinner about how I'd finally found my purpose, taking care of Grandpa. Right around the time Uncle Robert suggested I was trying too hard to insert myself into family business. Attorney Torres wasn't done. He pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Grandpa's familiar handwriting. "Sarah, your grandfather also left you this letter. He specifically requested that it be read aloud to everyone present." My hands were shaking as I took the envelope. I could barely believe this was happening. The deed to the house was sitting in front of me, and now there was a letter explaining why. "Would you like me to read it, or would you prefer to read it yourself?" Attorney Torres asked gently. I looked around the room at all the shocked faces staring at me. Madison looked like she was about to have a complete breakdown. Uncle Robert was pacing behind his chair, muttering under his breath about contesting the will, but some of the other family members looked pleased. Aunt Linda was actually smiling through her tears. "I'll read it," I said, my voice barely steady. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers and unfolded the letter. It was written in Grandpa's careful handwriting, the same handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists for 25 years. "My dearest Sarah," I began, then had to stop to clear my throat. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably as shocked as everyone else in that room." I looked up and saw Madison staring at me with pure fury in her eyes. I continued reading. "Let me tell you why I made this decision. You may not share my blood, but you share my values. While others visited when it was convenient, you were there when it mattered. You were there through your mother's illness, through my surgeries, through my loneliest days after your grandmother passed." Madison made a choking sound, but I kept reading. "You helped me maintain this house with love, not obligation. You sat with me on the porch and listened to my stories like they mattered. You made sure I took my medications, drove me to appointments, and treated me like family when some of my actual family treated me like a burden." The letter continued. "Blood makes you related, Sarah, but loyalty makes you family. This house needs someone who understands that family is built on love, not DNA. Take care of it the way you took care of me." When I finished reading, you could have heard a pin drop in that room. The silence after I finished reading Grandpa's letter lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then all hell broke loose. Madison exploded. "This is ridiculous. I'm contesting this will. There's no way this can be legal." She was pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal. She manipulated him. She isolated him from his real family. Uncle Robert was right behind her. "We're getting our own lawyer. This whole thing stinks of elder abuse." Dad wasn't thinking clearly at the end. But Attorney Torres had obviously dealt with this kind of reaction before. He calmly pulled out another folder. "Actually, I anticipated this response. Henry asked me to prepare for the possibility that his decision might be challenged." He spread several documents across the table. "These are statements from Henry's doctor confirming his mental competency, dated photographs showing the condition of the house and property, and detailed records of every family member's visits over the past 2 years." Madison's face went pale again as she realized what those records would show. "According to these logs," Attorney Torres continued, "Sarah visited an average of 6 days per week for the past 2 years. Madison, your last recorded visit was Christmas Day, 8 months ago." The truth hit the room like a bomb. 8 months. Madison hadn't seen her grandfather in 8 months, and yet she felt entitled to inherit his most precious possession. Uncle Robert tried one more time. "Look, we appreciate what Sarah did, but the house should stay in the bloodline. That's what tradition dictates." That's when Aunt Linda finally spoke up. She'd been quiet through most of the drama, but now she stood up and looked directly at her husband. "Robert, sit down and be quiet. You're embarrassing yourself and dishonoring your father's memory." She turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Sarah, your grandfather made the right choice. We all know it, even if some of us are too proud to admit it." Madison made one last desperate attempt. "Fine, keep the stupid house, but don't expect any of us to consider you family anymore." I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who had spent 25 years making me feel unwelcome in my own family. Then I said something that surprised even me. "Madison, I never needed your permission to be family, and I never needed your approval to belong." She stormed out of the office, Uncle Robert following behind her, both of them muttering threats about lawyers and appeals that we all knew would go nowhere. After they left, the atmosphere in the room completely changed. Cousin Jenny came over and hugged me. "Sarah, I'm so happy for you. Grandpa made the perfect choice." Other family members started approaching, some apologizing for years of staying silent during Madison's comments, others just expressing genuine happiness for my inheritance. That was 6 months ago. Madison did try to contest the will, but her lawyer took one look at the documentation and advised her to drop it. Turns out, it's pretty hard to argue with video evidence of Grandpa explicitly stating his reasoning and medical records proving his competency. The house is mine now, and I've turned it into something beautiful. I kept all of Grandpa's stories alive by creating a memory wall with photos and his handwritten notes about family history. Grandma Rose's garden is blooming better than ever because I actually have time to tend to it properly. But here's the most amazing part. I've opened my home to other people who understand what it means to choose your family. Mrs. Chen from down the street, who's 92 and has no relatives nearby, has Sunday dinner with me every week. My neighbor David, whose family disowned him years ago, helps me maintain the property and has become like a brother to me. We've created something Grandpa would be proud of, a home filled with people who show up for each other. Madison and I actually ran into each other at the grocery store last month. I expected awkwardness, maybe more anger, but she surprised me. She approached me and said, "Sarah, I owe you an apology. I spent so many years thinking about what I deserved that I never thought about what Grandpa deserved. He deserved to have someone who genuinely cared about him, not someone who saw him as a stepping stone to an inheritance." We talked for almost an hour in the parking lot. She told me she'd been in therapy, working through her sense of entitlement and learning about what real relationships look like. We're not best friends, but we're family again, the way family should be. Looking back, I realized Grandpa Henry didn't just leave me a house. He left me a lesson that changed my entire understanding of belonging. You can't choose your blood relatives, but you can choose to be family to someone. And sometimes, the people who aren't supposed to be your family end up being the most family of all. Every morning when I sit on that same porch swing where Grandpa comforted me as a scared 8-year-old, I remember his words, "Family is about who belongs, not about who was here first." He was right. And now I finally understand that I had always belonged. Sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, and the best inheritance isn't money or property. It's learning what love really looks like. So what do you think? Did Grandpa Henry make the right choice? Have you ever been in a situation where someone questioned whether you belonged in your own family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. This experience taught me that the strongest families aren't built on blood. They're built on showing up, caring deeply, and choosing each other every single day. Sometimes the people who love us most aren't the ones we share DNA with, and that's perfectly okay. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear that they belong exactly where they are. And if you want to hear more real-life stories about family, relationships, and finding your place in the world, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next video.